Welcome to the Friends of Fantasy Benefits Baseball Podcast. I'm Justin Mason, lead fantasy writer and analyst at friendsoffantasybenefits.com. Join me on this episode, as always on Monday nights, is Dave McDonald. Dave, how you doing, my friend?
Hey, how we doing tonight, Justin?
Just another beautiful Monday night. I was just telling you and our guests that I got a lot of projection work to do. So I'll be up late. But joining us today is Mark Kieffer. How you doing, my friend?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, guys. I'm excited to be here. Got my Rockies hoodie on, ready to go.
There we go. We got a hometown guy to discuss the Colorado Rockies. Spoiler alert, this is not a team filled with superstars for fantasy, but there are some good fantasy nuggets. Mark, why don't you remind everybody where you can reach on social media? And then I don't know if you have any work to plug, but talk about what you've done in the industry.
Yeah, so I wrote over at Rotoballer and Stochastic for the last couple of years, kind of taking a little hiatus from those sites. My Twitter handle is Mark_Kieffer, Kieffer. Big fantasy baseball player, been playing it since 1997 when Brad Radke won 20 games or whatever. That was my first season playing fantasy baseball. So I've been doing it for a while. Love the game, like talking about it. And yeah. You can, I'll be tweeting about fantasy baseball stuff as we get closer to the season,
And you can always reach Dave on Twitter at RunDNCD. Don't forget that D. You can reach me on Twitter at Justin Mason FWFB. Give us those 5-star reviews. Really, really appreciate everyone who's been giving us those 5-star reviews. Probably after next week, I'll read through them and stuff like that on air and kind of give the shout outs to everybody who's been sending us so many great 5-star reviews. I think we're up to 22 or 23 5-star reviews for the month of January. And we will be giving away a free RotoWire shirt at the end of the month and one each month. Until the start of the season. So, and if you give me one, a few of you have been doing this recently, but if you give me if you give us a 5-star review on Spotify, make sure you screenshot it and DM it to me, email it to me, justinmasonfantasy@gmail.com's email, or you can DM it to me on Twitter. So that makes sure I have it, I can put it in the drawing because it doesn't show me who is responsible for the 5-star reviews on Spotify like it does on iTunes. So. Let's jump right in and talk about these Rockies. Let's start with the catching situation. They've got Elias Diaz and Brian Serven. Diaz was a kind of a trendy name coming into drafts last year. Disappointed, and I can tell you that from my own experience because I had him on a number of teams. Any chance he bounces back? Any chance Serven is usable in fantasy there, Mark?
I don't know. I mean, I think with Diaz, you kind of, I would say in 2021, he had a good season. Last year, he had a downgrade. But it looks like, last season's numbers are more in line with his career numbers. He has a career 139 ISO. He had a 140 ISO last year. He has a career almost 20% K rate. He had a 21% K rate last year. So he's 32 years old. I don't think there's really a lot of upside. I guess if I was going to project anything from him, it'd be something close to his career.
Wait, did you say he's 32 years old?
Yes.
I think he's 28, right?
No, Diaz is 32.
Oh, Diaz. I thought you were talking about Serven.
Diaz. No. Yeah, you're good. No, Diaz. So, I think Diaz is the primary catcher on that team most likely. But I don't know. I don't know if any of them were very useful for fantasy, to be honest. I don't really see a big bounce back from Diaz. I would say last year is kind of more in line with his career numbers. Yeah.
Dave?
I don't know if he's going to get the playing time to be worthwhile. I always if you're going to take a shot on anybody, might as well be a Rocky because, things can go well for you there more than in any other park, obviously, with the climate there. So, you can't go in expecting the half season with 18 homers that he gave you in 2021, but could he do it again? Probably. I'm not really expecting it, but, like Mark said, I think his numbers were more in line last year with his career numbers. You look at his home run per fly ball rate in 2021, and it was at 16%, whereas, his career rate is closer to 10%. But, he hasn't also really never played a full season. Like the most plate appearances he's had in a year is last year at 381. So I just don't think he's ever going to get full playing time in order to really give you enough value to be worth using.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you guys. I mean, Diaz is somewhat interesting because he's in Colorado. The problem is, I mean, he put so many of his batted balls on the ground that like he's never going to like tap into any sort of power like he did in 2021 if he's got an almost 50% ground ball rate. So I mean, if we saw him like raise a little his launch angle, he could be a little bit more interesting guy. Like, max exit velocity, is like almost 112. Like that's interesting for a guy who has pretty damn good contact skills inside the zone. Like he's been 88, 89% zone contact the last 2 years. So if we see like a little tweak in the launch angle, there could be some interesting play for him, but I still think he's kind of a lower end C2 or a guy you pick up off the waiver wire in most formats. So moving on over to first base, you got CJ Cron, who is fantastic at home and just atrocious on the road. Like it's unreal. Like, and which makes him very, very difficult to rank and do projections on, because depending on your format, he could be a lot more valuable if you're in a daily moves format and you can bench him for those road starts. Mark, are you drafting CJ Cron this year?
I mean, it's not a priority, but I mean, it's not off my list either. I mean, it's kind of like a Race Hoskins or something like that. You know what I mean? It just depends on how you attack your draft, to be honest. You know what I mean? But he's a guy I've picked up, I think, in the draft champions. I wouldn't shy away from him. I think the thing about him that, it's interesting. It's sometimes when you just get caught up in the fantasy stuff, you kind of lose sight of the player's production. Like in like for fantasy for 2022, in some ways it's better than 2021. He had more runs, had more RBI, same home runs more or less. But his some of his peripheral stats are worse. You know what I mean? And again, more in line with his career numbers. Like last year, he had 29 home runs, but he did it on 632 plate appearances versus 547. So I mean, some of those counting stats is the benefit of him having over 600 plate appearances, where early in his career, I mean, that was career high for plate appearances. He's more of a 500, 550 plate appearance kind of guy. His K rate went up 5%. His ISO was 210 last year. His career ISO was 213. His career batting average is 261. Last year he bat 257. His career on base is 322. His on base last year was 315. 2 years ago was 375. So, I actually think he might be declining a little bit. I know there's those home road splits as well, but he's solid. I mean, he's probably someone's going to put up 20, 25, maybe 30 if he's lucky. Home runs and 80 RBI, 80 runs, something like that if he's healthy all year. I think he's fine. I think I'd rather have him, if you're grasping for first baseman late or, middle or corner infield guy, something like that. I mean, I'm okay with having him. He's not someone trying to prioritize. He just kind of seems to be, it doesn't really matter the park. If you kind of look at his career, his numbers last year are very close to his Tampa Bay Rays, somewhere between the Rays and the Twins year, 2018, 2019. Similar K rate, similar walk rate, similar on base, similar average. So, that's kind of who he is. I think he just doesn't draw a lot of walks, strikes out a bunch, has a chance to hit some home runs, but I don't really think, I don't think he's going to hit like 40, 45 or something. It was kind of cool for a little bit. He had that little, he was the NL leader in RBI for like a little bit. I don't know if it was like after a month or a couple months or All-Star break. I remember that was kind of exciting for a little bit, but it wasn't going to last. I mean, that team around him's not very good. So that's the thing that's hard too with projections. It's hard to project home run or not home runs, RBI and runs, because it's team dependent, right? I mean, guys got to get on base.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I like him. I'm not like super excited about him, but he's solid. He's a solid dude.
Where are you at on CJ Cron there, Dave?
I'm actually a lot more bullish on Cron. We saw what he could do in the first half. He was a superstar. 20 homers, almost hit 300 there. A lot of the stuff in the second half looked kind of fluky. He seemed to have an unlucky hit rate as his quality of at-bats actually got better. His home runs per fly ball tanked in the second half too. I feel like, and he had never struggled versus lefties previously. And last year he just was not nearly as good against lefties. I think he could easily have a bounce back year and hit 35, maybe even 40 homers and hit closer to like 280 like he did in 2021. So yeah, he's actually someone I'm looking to draft this year.
So here is and you'll hear me kind of mention this with a number of the guys on the Rockies, especially guys like CJ Cron, who are so much better at home than they are on the road offensively, right? This year, if you're playing NFBC, you can, with the Friday switches, you can get 80 of the 81 home games without getting any away games. Just the way the Rockies schedule works out. And shout out to Kevin Hastings of Pitcher List and the On the Wire podcast for digging that stat out and letting me know when we were at First Pitch Arizona this year. So if you are playing an NFBC, you can take his homework, which last year was 22 home runs, a 302 batting average, and 309 plate appearances, and then replace the road stuff with a replacement level player and probably have a top 5 to 7 first baseman pretty easily. Now, and if you're playing in a daily moves format, so for those of you who don't play on NFBC, you're like, well, what is that? How does that help me? If you're playing in a daily moves format, you can obviously get the 81 home games and none of the away games because he was atrocious on the road last year. He had 214, only 7 of his 29 home runs came on the road. His
and in 2021 as well.
Yeah. And so that is the play. If you're playing in a weekly moves format, he's obviously he drops down, and then you have to just take the straight projections as they are, and then he's probably like a borderline-ish top 10 first baseman, right? In that Rhys Hoskins area and with other guys like that. But those of you who play in NFBC or play in a daily moves format, you should be bumping up these Rockies, right? These Rockies that we are interested in, you should be bumping them up because you can maximize your home plate appearances with a streamer from your bench, right? And so you just want to make sure that, hey, if I'm going to take a Rocky, especially if you play in shallow bench leagues, if you're playing in a league with only 3 bench spots and you're going to
I was going to say the Yahoo daily change leagues are very, very short benches. So
and so is ESPN and stuff like that.
You have to put a lot of emphasis on flexible players, like guys who play multiple positions.
So just make sure you are being smart about which, I wouldn't overload with Rockies because then you won't have enough bench players to kind of supplant from your bench. But just be very smart about making sure you've got a good bench player for those Rockies like CJ Cron. You get out of your lineup when they're on the road and get somebody in for the replacement value because I think that is the way to attack the Rockies offense this year.
That's it. Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't realize you could do that. I mean, I knew you could do that. I didn't realize their schedule worked out like that.
It just somehow, so it just works out really, really well that almost all of their switches happen on a Friday as opposed to starting a series on a Thursday. And then, you have to take at least that one game or whatever. So it just works out really, really well this year for NFBC players to attack Rockies hitters. So highly recommend you do that. Let's move over to second base, talk about Brendan Rodgers. I mean, I've never been a Brendan Rodgers guy. I feel like the industry as a whole is finally kind of coming around to this guy just is kind of a bland player, even in Colorado. Dave, are you interested in Brendan Rodgers?
I mean, he's okay. I think he's like a middle infield type guy, but I think you kind of said it I think he pretty much is what we think he is, unless he can raise that launch angle. I mean, that's really the big thing is, his launch angle's below 5 last year, and it was at 6.3 before that. So, I think people are kind of, he hits the ball hard. His max EV is 112, 46% hard hit rate, 80% contact rate, 88% zone contact rate. He doesn't strike out a lot. He walks a decent amount. It's really just that launch angle. But unless we see any kind of evidence that something's going to change there, and this is also a guy who's had, some injury issues over his years too. So, I don't dislike him as a middle infield option. I just you can't project him to take the next step either.
Where are you at on Rodgers there, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of the same way. So, I mean, living here, he kind of had a lot of hype early on. And then, like you guys are saying, kind of is who he is. Better real life player. He's a pretty good defensive player. Better real life player than fantasy player. The thing I don't like about him is if I'm playing middle infield guys, I like to have a guy that steals bases, and he doesn't do that. So, I'd rather have a guy that steals, like, I don't know, like a Gene Segura or somebody that's at least going to give me like 10 steals or something, So I'm usually kind of out on middle infield guys that don't run. Obviously, if you're playing in like a draft champions, draft and hold format, I'll take him just to have depth. And like you're saying, you get those injuries and you don't have a waiver wire, probably use him more than you think you might. But in a regular mixed league, 12, 15 teams are probably just staying away from good real life player, not a great fantasy guy.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of these guys, like, he not only struggles to raise that launch angle to be able to actually tap into that power that I think is somewhat there. Like, I don't think he's like overly powerful guy or anything like that, but if he could raise his launch angle to kind of more optimal kind of angle, like maybe he hits 25 home runs. But he also struggles against right-handed pitching, which to me, you don't steal bases, struggle against right-handed pitching. It's such a bland profile. Maybe in his best seasons, he gets some BABIP help from, the thin air in Colorado and that big outfield and stuff. And he can hit for a good average, but it's still we're talking 15 home runs with a good average if he plays a full year. And like Dave mentioned, he's a guy who's really had trouble staying on the field throughout his career. So just no go for me. Ezequiel Tovar, though, is an interesting guy. Maybe it's kind of the shiny new toy syndrome, but it looks like the Rockies are going to give him everyday at bats at shortstop starting out the season. Mark, are you interested in Ezequiel Tovar?
I go back and forth. I think if you asked me a couple weeks ago, I don't know. I think I said that, and then I was looking at some of my NFBC teams. I'm like, oh, I guess I drafted him. So I guess I'm in on him now. You know what I mean? No, I mean, I think the thing that people hang on to is he had 17 steals in 66 games in AA last year. With the new rules and stuff. I mean, obviously being, to steal a base, got to get on base. I learned that the hard way a couple years ago with Victor Robles and some of these guys that have good speed, but maybe aren't, they don't get on base, doesn't help you that much. But, I agree. I think he's going to have every chance to be the everyday guy. There's not a lot of great backup options on the Rockies, so I don't think there's necessarily somebody coming to take his playing time, if that kind of makes sense. It really comes down to getting on base. I mean, he just didn't have very many at bats last year. I mean, he only played 9 games. It's hard to glean. I mean, the one pause for me is in AA, he had a 22% strikeout rate. I know strikeouts, I mean, maybe I'm a little bit old school with that. It just, guys that have a low walk rate, high strikeout rate in the minor leagues, oftentimes you'll see the same thing in the major league. So it's kind of like if that upside can outweigh the downside. You know what I mean? When I see a high strikeout rate, I think that, the player has probably a lot of variance in their projections. But he has speed, and I get, if he runs in the majors like he ran last year, I mean, he could maybe steal you 30 bases if he's healthy and plays all year, but he's also got to be able to get on base. I just haven't seen enough from him yet to know, but that's one of those ones you want to see in the spring training, see how he does for sure. But I'm in on him for now. Especially in a draft champions type league.
Dave, where are you at on Tovar? Are you interested in him?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, you don't want to be over reliant on rookies coming up, but I mean, a 21% strikeout rate is not high for the minors, so I'm perfectly fine with that. It is a thing though. I avoid anybody who's 25% plus in the minors K rate, because then usually they come up and you can add 5%, so then they're at 30% at least in most circumstances. So he did have a high swinging strike rate, but again, we're only talking about a 35 plate appearance last year in the majors, and we don't have nearly enough info to tell what his StatCast numbers look like. So I can't tell if he's going to be a Victor Robles type guy where his quality of contact isn't very good. But just going based on, what he did in the minors, like he has some power, he has some speed. Anytime you can get a potential 5-category contributor in Colorado, I'm definitely interested, especially because that K rate to me looks good. Most years it was real low, and the highest 21%. I'm good with that for sure. I mean, he'll probably be around 24-25% in the majors, and that's doable.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, the thing that's kind of curious to me. I mean, I don't make projections or anything, but you just kind of look at some of these projections, like the bat and ATC and some of them. I mean, they just have him so low, right? They have him as like a 15-15 guy for the most part, and just is that just them being overly conservative? Are they taking that limited, major league level, data and trying to extrapolate it? Or they, I guess. For me, if I'm going off I don't like the projections that are put out for him, but I think he can outdo those projections,
Yeah,
at least on the speed side.
I mean, and like Derek Hardy's talked about, like, projections struggle with guys coming up from the minor leagues, right? Because
for sure
they don't have like a base of information to work with, right? I think like these are the kind of spots where, like, projections really struggle, and where, like, the human element can kind of overcome projections a little bit easier. Tovar doesn't project to have like a ton of power necessarily. Maybe he has league average, power at probably best. But he's shown like pretty good contact skills in the minors. He showed a good understanding of the strike zone in the minors. So like and we know he has speed, right? Like, so, he's not necessarily like a burner. I think he ends up being kind of a better like sum of all parts kind of guy than he is like having a carrying tool in fantasy. But he's also a very good defensive player, which should keep him in the lineup on a daily basis. So like I do think like the projections, while they don't typically capture things fairly well, I think a 15-15 projection is actually pretty accurate. Like, and it actually may be less power than that. But I think he's a guy that could probably hit 270, 12 home runs, 15 stolen bases, but play every day and just kind of accumulate stats that way. And in your deeper leagues, I think that's a really interesting option, and the price isn't very high on him. So
I think most leagues that's an interesting option. I mean, 2 projection systems have him hitting 280. I mean, projection systems are super conservative. Like they have guys who hit 300 every year. They have him at like 280.
Let's clarify, because both of those that isn't a different projection system. So because you're looking at Steamer and Fangraphs depth charts, right?
Okay, well let's just talk about Steamer then.
Yeah, because all Fangraphs depth chart is Steamer's projections based on Fangraphs' staff playing time output.
Okay.
So it's always going to be like almost the exact same batting average or rate stats. So,
but I mean, ATC has him at 273, and that's like a combination of a bunch of different systems. So, and Steamer has him at 280. So, I mean, that's a very good projection in terms of average.
Yeah, and I think that
and by nature it's going to be conservative. So, essentially that's probably on the lowish end of what you can actually expect.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that is ambitious for a guy like Tovar. Looking kind of like his contact skills in the minor leagues from the data that I have.
Oh, you have minor league contact stuff?
I do. Yeah, I do. I have. And he kind of profiles to be more of a league average contact guy.
I'm guessing his speed and hitting in cores and maybe even the quality contact that he hits with probably all contribute to his average being higher, I would imagine.
Yeah, and I think that is where you can get the range of outcomes that are within 280. I would be more conservative and probably put his batting average around 265. And I probably actually could tell you exactly what I have him projected for. which would make things a lot easier. But I didn't bring up my projections.
Well, so the bottom line is he should be a positive in the average category, even if it's not.
I don't think he's going to hurt you.
He's not going to be a negative, right? It'll be league average or better, probably.
And I think the beauty of his defense is that even when he struggles, because we expect guys who are coming up from the minors in their first, full season at the major leagues to have ups and downs, right? Pitchers will adjust to them. They'll adjust back. I think he could easily stay in the lineup because defensively he's so good that I don't think the Rockies are going to necessarily want him out of that lineup. So I brought up my projection. I have him for 264, 13 home runs, 11 stolen bases.
And let's keep in mind, league average the last 2 years has been 244 and 243. So he is well above average.
It, yeah.
Yeah, but that's not league average for a fantasy league.
Okay.
That includes a lot of guys you're never gonna even think about rostering in a fantasy league.
I think it's not as high as you're gonna think it is, though.
I bet you it's around. I bet you like the category like average is probably around 250 in a fantasy league. Maybe
okay.
So
yeah. 250.
Let's move over to Ryan McMahon and talk about him because he's a guy that I was actually kind of surprised when I did my projections, like how high he ended up coming up in terms of like where he ranked among other third basemen. It's because he kind of added a speed component out of nowhere the last couple of seasons, which makes him really interesting at a position that doesn't offer a lot of speed options. Dave, where are you at on Ryan McMahon this year?
I mean, you kind of just said it right there. The speed is what makes him a little interesting because I kind of expect, with the new rules, I don't expect everybody to kind of just run more automatically, but the elite guys are probably going to run about as much as they normally do, maybe slightly more. The guys who don't run at all probably still won't run. But it's these guys who who steal like 5 to 15 bags who I really think you're going to see the uptick with. And so he could be one of those guys. I mean, he attempted 10 steals last year. So, I mean, I think we kind of know who he is in terms of everything else. I mean, I think you can pretty much expect him to hit 250, 255, maybe 245, somewhere in that range with 20 to 25 homers. He's another guy who struggles on the road, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's a guy who you could sit on the road. But he also doesn't hit lefties very well, and I believe they sit him versus some lefties too. So I just don't think there's like a ton of upside, but I think the speed component is what makes him interesting this year.
Mark, are you in on Ryan McMahon?
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of the guy I take if I miss out on third base. He's kind of, oh crap, is it him or Justin Turner or whatever? We start getting down to those tiers where it's like, am I going to take a 38-year-old or am I at least going to just take a guy that, a little bit younger? I mean, 28. But I agree with what Dave was saying. I kind of know who he is. I mean, the speed, maybe gets you 10 steals, which is nice. I mean, something I really like to do in my fantasy teams is get guys like that, right? Get guys that get a first baseman gets you 8 to 10, get you a third baseman that gets you 8 to 10. Maybe that guy you thought would steal 40, steals only 20 due to playing time injury or something. You don't lose as much. It's nice to spread out the speed across multiple positions rather than try to bank on the guy that gets 50 or 60, or you hope to get 50 or 60, spread out the risk a little bit more. If a guy gets hurt, easier to replace. So, yeah, I mean, I like him. I don't really expect him to do much different than what we've seen him do in the past, which is not too exciting. But, 7 to 10 steals is always a nice bonus to have at a corner position. And like I said, he's kind of my third base. If I'm late on that, I'm waiting. He's kind of like that last guy I'll take before I feel like it kind of drops off a little bit more. So.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of mentioned when I was introducing him, like when I did my projections, I was like, oh wow, like the added speed component to him, even only giving him, I think I only gave him 7 stolen bases, which is what he stole last year. It's not even accounting for the fact that he could have a little bit of an uptick with the larger bases and kind of the pitch clock and step off rules this year. It bumped him up into the top 10 at third base for me because there's so few guys after that, like top 7 or 8 that actually run, which is really, really interesting because he's going off the board as the number 18 third baseman since Christmas in NFBC draft champion. So like, I feel like you're getting a pretty nice discount on a guy that I think maybe people kind of overlook because he looks a little bit bland. He doesn't have prodigious power. And he's also one of these guys, very much like CJ Cron, where you can kind of platoon him home and road, right? Dave mentioned he's better at home than he is on the road. So, like, if you've got a third baseman you feel comfortable with, that you can kind of platoon with him and get those home starts for McMahon and then, fill someone else back in for his stuff on the road, it can be really, really beneficial.
I definitely like the draft price. It's he is going at a very nice cost.
Yeah. I mean, I got him in. I know it's a different format, but I got him that gladiator format. I did one of those like a week ago. I got him in the 17th round. Kind of going after even like a Brandon Drury. I mean, so yeah. I mean,
yeah, he's going about a round later than Drury. Yeah.
Yeah. So on this team, I have him as my like corner infield. Is my corner infield kind of guy. So got him kind of late. So.
Yeah, because Drury even loses value in that kind of that gladiator format because you can't really take advantage of his multi-positional eligibility. So I much prefer McMahon in that kind of format as well. Yeah. Other guys in the infield, I'm just gonna ask, you care about any of them? Harold Castro, Elehuris Montero, Michael Toglia, like Mark, you care about any of these guys?
I think Montero could platoon a little bit with McMahon. I could see something like that if he's struggling again. I could see that. He's going to spell, right? He's a corner infielder. He's going to spell McMahon. He's going to spell Cron. He's going to get a couple hundred at bats, probably just by just because the major league season's long. Not really fantasy relevant, but he's a guy. I mean, he's also a guy that people pay attention to as part of that Arenado trade. So he's kind of one of those guys. Kind of like, okay, what's he gonna do? Who are some of the Toglia or whatever his name is?
Yeah, Toglia and then Harold Castro.
Yeah, I mean, probably. I don't know if he's even gonna come up. He's a pretty good defensive player. I don't know. No interest from a fantasy standpoint. You'd have to really, I think, see how spring training goes and see somebody like kind of tear it up. I think the thing to talk about, I know with the Rockies. So you look at this team, they have a lot of expiring contracts. And a normal team, you'd look at them and be like, okay, like Grichuk, they'll probably trade, you go through all these expiring contracts. Well, they're going to try to wheel and deal and trade some of these guys, but the Rockies don't do stuff like that, right? They extended Bard. The thing is like this market is like they were top 10 in attendance last year with a bad team, right? Like Denver's a market that has a lot of transplants. People are, a lot of California people are Dodgers and Giants fans. A lot of people from Texas, a lot of people from the Midwest. When the Royals come, they sell out games. I mean, it's more of they're in downtown kind of the happening area, by all the bars and rooftop decks and stuff. So like young people go out, do their thing. And relative to a lot of these other stadiums, I mean, I've been to Petco, I've been to San Francisco. I don't know what they call it anymore. Oracle, AT&T.
Yeah, Oracle. Yeah.
It's much less expensive than like a lot of ballparks these days. So I'm not like a stand for the owners, but like the way they operate is like, let's get like a superstar, right? Like a Charlie Blackmon, like get the one guy. They're hoping Kris Bryant's that guy, right? Like have a guy that's out there that you're kind of marketing the team around. The opponents of the team is going to draw. The price of going in is going to draw. I took my family last year. The club section tickets were like buy one get one free or buy one get one half off. So it's relatively affordable. It's a nice park. I mean, it's not Petco, it's not the new Busch, but it's a nice ballpark, And so the thing about the Rockies is like they never do the rebuild. They're kind of like the Rangers, but doing it worse. You know what I mean? Like they're not doing the full rebuild thing. They try to come out and say, well, we're trying to compete, we're trying to win, but they don't have the talent to do it. So I think the other thing to think about is you see a lot of these expiring contracts. You see Cron's on his last year of his deal. You see Grichuk's on the last year of his deal. On a normal team, they would be trade bait and people would be talking about, well, they might play half the season somewhere else. In Colorado, though, they'll let them play it out and walk away or retire for Blackmon or whatever it is, and so I don't know where I was going with that, but I think where I was going to go with that. Some of these younger, some of these younger guys, I don't think they're going to start off other than like maybe Tovar. They're going to. There's a lot of guys with major league experience, whether they're good or not, and I think they're just going to come in and do the more veteran thing, keep the prospects down. They're not going to go in full tank mode. They're not going to go full get rid of all the veterans and bring up all the young guys. So I think other than Tovar, any of these guys are maybe the guys of the future. Yeah, they might come up, September next year, that sort of thing. But I don't really foresee them bringing up a lot of guys. I don't see them like churning the roster over and doing like a youth movement. I see them more this like battling Arizona for fourth place in the division and trying to say they're going to compete. They have a new GM, right? So if they win 80 games instead of 68, he can go and say, well, I improved the team by this many wins. And so I don't agree with how they do it, but that's kind of the mentality of the team. So I think that's just something to kind of keep in mind. If this was a different organization, I think we'd be looking at a lot of these players as to, well, if they get traded, they might be bench pieces or they might be platoon pieces somewhere else. But these guys might play if they're healthy all year, even if they don't have a deal on the table to come back. So I just something to keep in mind, I think, with some of these guys.
Yeah. Dave, you care about any of these other infield bench pieces?
No, I mean, I think Toglia has some interesting skills, but it's offset by the fact that he strikes out so goddamn much. I mean, he had a 37% carry, and this is kind of what we were talking about before. Like his minor league carry was right around 30%, and then it went up about 7% in the majors, which is what you should expect. So, he does run a little bit, and he does have some power, but you look at his between the K rate and then you look at his, the barrel rate and the hard hit rate are okay. Max EV is not great. Contact rate is below 70%. Just all the things he'd have to take a pretty big step forward, and he's not in line for playing time either right now. So I'm just not interested.
Yeah, I'm with you. Let's talk about the outfield. Start off with Kris Bryant, who shot up the ADP last year because of his signing in Colorado. People went absolutely crazy. And he did exactly what Kris Bryant does, which is play well until he got hurt and then missed the majority of the season. His price is depressed because of that. Dave, are you buying in on the reduced price?
I like him. I like the skills. We saw him start to run more and more. He had 10 steals in 2021. But he is going to be 31. He does have lower back issues, and running probably won't help that. But this is a guy who can hit for a good average. He's got some pop. He can hit 25 homers, maybe more in Coors, depending on whether he can keep the ball in the air enough. But I like him. I don't know. I think it'll be dependent on my roster construction whether I actually draft him or not. There's a lot of guys going around him that I like. I like Taylor Ward more. But like Stanton goes around after him, and I'm not even a Stanton guy, but I don't know. I feel like it would be. I mean, they're different players. They are, but and they both have the same injury risk there too. But I am back in on him. Like he got too high last year with flying up the ADP boards, and I think that can happen again this year. By the way, like if he comes to spring training and he's healthy, people are going to remember.
He reportedly is healthy, so
yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. Like he wasn't coming off of any, other than the back injury is probably going to cost him some games, but it's not something that you're going to miss an entire season with in general. So he's not coming off some super a serious injury that's going to hinder him going into 2023. So I think a lot of people are going to kind of remember how high he was going last year and push him up. He's going like 139 since Christmas. I imagine he's going to be a top 100 player by March easily.
Mark, any interest in Kris Bryant at a reduced rate?
Yeah, I mean, like what Dave's saying, I think I've taken him. I don't know, maybe not, but I've considered it where he's going. But like he's saying, I mean, the thing about Kris Bryant is, he came in the league and played really well, right? And he seemed like he was on like kind of a Hall of Fame path. And then you kind of look at him and he's 31 and he's kind of not on that path anymore. But people, like Dave was saying, remember that. They remember how good he was when he first started. If he's doing well and looks healthy, that's really going to drive it. So I would agree with Dave where if you're, it depends how you build your team. If you do your roster, and probably makes more sense to do it earlier in the process than later, right? If you're getting to mid-March, his price is going to go up if he's doing well. And if he's not doing well in spring training in Arizona, where it's like Coors Field, but in the summertime down there, everybody hits well in Arizona. It seems like for spring training, there'd be some major red flags. You'd probably go down, but I like him at the price. I mean, he's going to play outfield. You always need some outfielders, and especially these 5 outfield formats. He's going to get, if he's healthy, he's going to get all the playing time. And yeah, I mean, I could see him hitting 30 home runs this year, potentially, depending on how many plate appearances he gets. Solid player. His best days are probably behind him, but you can always put together a spike year again. I'm not counting him out at 31. 31, 32, 33. He could have a year that he pops a little bit, one last time. And I think he'll be solid. He has good skills. So yeah, but like Dave is saying, everybody remembers the hype when he first came in. People remember the almost 40 home run season the second year. People kind of thought he was going to be the next big superstar. He's getting paid like one in Colorado. It's like $28 million a year. So I agree with what he says. I don't have too much else to add, but I take him now early on and then probably fade him later on.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. Like, let's just talk about the last 4 seasons for Kris Bryant. 2019, 147 games played. Pretty much a full season, right?
Yep.
2020, 34 of the 60 games in the shortened season. So you get a half a season. 2021, 144 games played. So pretty much a full season from Kris Bryant. Last year, 42 games played. Like, it's just a massive risk that he misses time. Now, I love the upside, especially in Colorado, because I think he can run like a 330 BABIP in Colorado, which would mean like he could hit 290 with like 25 plus home runs and steal some bases. That being said, I think you really have to be in a shallow league with IL spots for it to make sense. Like, I just think the risk is so great as a top 150 pick that if you're in a 15-team league, that is one of your 10th, first 10 picks. And I don't know that I want to put that kind of risk into a top 10 pick in a 15-team league. So in your 10s and 12s where you've got IL spots, it makes a lot of sense. Because I don't think he's a guy you've got to necessarily platoon when he's not in Coors. I think he's going to be fine when he's outside of Coors. But in your deeper formats, like, I'm just staying away. I just don't trust him to stay healthy. What about Charlie Blackmon, Mark? Is it like, I mean, at this point in his career, like, what is he? Is he even worth drafting in most fantasy leagues?
I mean, he's old.
Yeah, that's true.
He's gonna DH, right? He's probably gonna be their DH. I mean, he's a solid real life player. I grabbed him in a draft champions, right? You know what I mean? Something like that. He's a fan favorite. Again, I mean, if he's productive and healthy, they'll put him in the lineup. I think they'll use him as DH to, save him. But I mean, he's a guy taken in a deeper format like that. He's not someone I'm necessarily targeting like in a mixed league. But I don't know. I mean, 15 home runs, the thing about the Rockies is, who are they going to have lead off, right? Are they going to have Daza lead off? Are they going to have him lead off? They didn't really go out and get anybody to. They kind of, going in the offseason, they wanted a center fielder that could lead off, and they didn't really get one. They have Daza, who's fast and can cover the ground and play good defense. So, but anyway, sorry, I don't know. Like, so with him, with Blackmon, I'll take him in a deeper format. I mean, he's not going to play a full season. He's not going to run much anymore, I don't think. So, I don't know, 15 home runs, 80 runs scored, maybe, something like that. If he gets enough plate appearances, probably good enough in a deeper format. Probably, probably not great like in a 12-team deal, but just depends on your format and how deep your league is. But I wouldn't cross him off. I still think he can he could bat 260 and hit 15 home runs. And, if Kris Bryant's healthy and CJ Cron's behind him, I mean, he can and he's batting ahead of them, I think he can score a decent amount of runs too when he's playing. So,
Dave, any interest in Charlie Blackmon?
I mean, I think he's fine as like a back end of your roster outfield option. The last couple of years, he just isn't hitting the ball as hard as he used to. He does look like a guy who's probably he might have a slight uptick in steals. He might steal you 5 bags. He's last couple of years, 3 and 4 he had. He'll give you a solid average. The good thing is that they do like to hit him in the top 4 lineup slots. Like pretty much, I think every game but one, they hit him 1 through 4 somewhere. Either a lot of leadoff, a lot of cleanup. So that's nice for the counting stats at least. He doesn't hurt you anywhere, and I think if he has an uptick in steals as I'm expecting, 5-6 steals maybe, he doesn't hurt you there either. So he's one of those guys that you're not taking any negatives anywhere, which is nice because he'll give you a 265, 270 at least, I would say, average. I just don't think you can expect that return to glory. I mean, his BABIP is way down, and I just think he's due to getting old. I think his skill slippage is real, but I think he's still usable.
He's like an old Andrew Benintendi, right? Kind of similar profile, right? Like in terms of,
I'm hoping that Benintendi is a lot more than that this year, but we'll see.
Jared Kelenic. Then I don't know, like somebody,
somebody. No, I get what you're saying.
Everybody drafts that. 15 home runs. It's
right. No, it's not.
There's no upside.
Yeah.
People do Benintendi because he's 28. There's the upside potential.
I do think that there is upside with Benintendi personally, but we'll see what happens this year. If he doesn't do it this year, though, then it's pretty much you're right.
I think the hard part with Blackmon is it is a high floor, which is great. Like you kind of go, I think I'm going to get 270, 15 home runs, and some chip and stolen bases. But he's never turning back into the Charlie Blackmon of old, right? Like he's never going to turn into this stud. And there are guys who are going at that same kind of a spot as him that you go, well, this guy's got warts for sure, but there's some upside. There's power speed upside in Brandon Marsh and in Garrett Mitchell. There's power upside in Jorge Soler. There's speed upside in Manny Margot, and maybe if Dylan Carlson figures out how to hit, there's some upside in Dylan Carlson or Juan Yepes, or upside in Jared Kelenic or Trent Grisham. It's so hard, at that point in the draft, when you're talking about just inside of the top 300 to go, well, what do I need right now is 65 runs scored and 15 home runs. Maybe if you drafted a risky team up to that point, you go, I need some stability, makes sense. But I'm hoping that I'm not in the position where I need stability. I'm hoping at that point in the draft, I'm looking for guys who can, hey, I'm taking this guy at pick 300 that can perform like I took him at pick 100.
Your track record says otherwise, buddy. But I'm hoping for your sake. I'm hoping for your sake you're not in that position. But you're 100% right. That's the point of the draft where you should be taking shots on upside, because if they don't work out, it doesn't, you can just drop them and
you can pick up the Charlie Blackmons of the world. Correct. Usually off of the waiver wire.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, you make a good point, and I doubt this person is out there that listens to this. But the first year I did the main event, I don't know when that was, 8 or 9 years ago or something. It's important you understand your team construction, especially if you're playing in a roto league, and what you have and what you need. Because, I remember when my first main event, I got really lost in the shuffle. I got really overwhelmed. Guys were going way earlier than I thought. I was grasping, and I'm sitting there, and it's like I'm drafting a Melky Cabrera. I mean, this is several years ago. A Melky Cabrera right in the middle of the draft. We already had a Lorenzo Cain. You had these guys that didn't have any power, but on a player rater might rate high because they're good in average. They're good everywhere, but they don't stand out anywhere. So they rate kind of above average in a rater tool type of a thing. But in a roto league where you're you already took Lorenzo Cain too early and you're behind in power, getting a Melky Cabrera is not going to help you out. And so when you play in a roto league, being very cognizant of what categories you're trying to target and where. Blackmon makes sense on some team constructions. Maybe you whipped on some outfielders early and you're behind on outfielders, and you get a stability guy and you get an upside guy, later on, something like that. It's just all about how you do it, right? I mean, a lot of the good players, they get consistency at the top and take shots in the middle and at the bottom. Because like Dave's saying, you can churn them. But that's the other piece of the game that everybody knows. I mean, people listen to this might know it, but it's also understanding that the NFBC is really a weekly league and not a season-long league, right? And it's also, it's understanding that in a 12-team league, you're going to churn that bench for the fab. Like when I first started playing, I was so good at playing like the Yahoo public leagues. I only used the waiver wire if someone got hurt, right? Because I would get like 8 top 50 guys in the first, 8 rounds or whatever. Where the NFBC league, you're constantly churning. You got to find those platoon advantages. You got to find those, 2-start pitchers. You're always turning over that bench. So you're not really drafting someone for the whole season. You know what I mean? And if you're talking about a back end guy, like Dave's saying, yeah, you pick up Blackmon, maybe he takes off, but if he doesn't, you drop him and get whatever, Kellenic or whoever. I don't know, whoever's going to be out there, the next Blackmon. But yeah. It's all about knowing what you have and what you need and being aware of categories if you're playing like in a roto league. But there are some constructions where I think it would make sense. I mean, in a draft champions league, I think it makes sense. You get to a point where you're like, personally, I'd rather have guys I know are going to get every day at bats versus the guy that, he might have a high upside, but he may not play until August.
Yeah, I was going to say in DCs, I think he makes a lot more sense. And he's also the kind of guy who you can usually see dropping 50 to 100 spots in ADP because he's that boring guy that nobody really wants to take. So I think you're going to see him fall a lot, and that's where you can maybe get some value out of him. Like, I don't think he'll go in the top 300 in most leagues.
Yeah, I agree. Let's talk about Yonathan Diaz, who could lead off some for the Rockies. Is he a guy you're targeting there, Mark?
No. Pass. 2 home runs or something? No. Good real life player. Well, because you gotta understand the team, right? They have this huge outfield, and they have Kris Bryant and Charlie Blackmon as outfielders on this team, right? Like they need somebody out there that can cover and play defense. So he's there primarily for that. The other thing I forgot to mention about this team is they're so good, they can pay Arenado $16 million not to play for them this year. So their their payroll is like $155 million or something. For the Rockies, it's kind of a high payroll. So I think they kind of know they have some holes, but they're not going to go out and fill those holes financially. They're like, well, we're going to stand pat and roll out with what we got, that sort of thing. So, he's a guy I wouldn't take at all. He's a good real life player. That's why he's there. He's there to play defense.
Mark's out here talking about filling holes. We're going to have to bleep some of this out before you put this out there for people.
I have never bleeped out a single thing on this podcast, so not starting tonight. Dave, do you care at all about Diaz?
No, I mean, he's a guy who I'm interested in streaming where he gets 6 or 7 games at home in a week, or even in a half week where I can stream him for a half week or whatever. But I'm not interested in drafting him really.
Yeah, I'm not either. So let's just move on to Randal Grichuk, guy who I was really excited about when the Rockies traded for him, and even blew a bunch of fab in Tout Wars, thinking hey, I just picked up a guy off of the waiver wire in a 15-team league that could potentially hit me 30 home runs, playing every day in Colorado. Fell pretty far short of my expectations in 2022. Any hope for him this year in 2023 there, Dave?
I think he just needs to hit the ball in the air more, and he could be interesting again. He's a guy who has some speed. His speed score is actually pretty high. And he did steal 4 bases last year, and he did run 3 times the previous year. So it's not unprecedented, but he is that kind of guy who could, look to steal a little bit more this year. He hits for a decent average. He's got some solid power. It was down a little bit last year. We were kind of hoping he would, the barrel rate and the max EV were both down last year compared to the previous year. And then he's also the last 2 years been below his career home run per fly ball rate. He's been more in the 13% range, whereas his career he's closer to 16%. So yeah, I do think that if things come together for him, he's a guy who can hit, 25, 30 homers if he gets it together. I'm I am interested. He plays in Coors. He's got a solid contact profile. 77% contact rate, 89% zone contact. He hits home runs. He does run a little bit. I did not look to see where he goes yet. He's going 256. Yeah, I'm definitely interested at that point in the draft, I think. So, he's interesting.
What about you, Mark? You interested in Grichuk?
Yeah, man. Plus is a contract year. He's making $10 million this year. About to expire. Go. He's 31. This is his chance to play for like one last contract or one last decent contract. No, I mean, I'm just kidding. I don't narrative it too much, but I mean, this is a guy that on a regular team you look at, they would probably trade him, but this is the Rockies, so they'll let him play the whole season and walk away. No, I mean, I'm interested. Like Dave's saying, I mean, he hits the ball hard. He just like the launch angle was down, you know what I mean? But his hard hit rate was good. Yeah, I mean, he it seems like he's set up to have a bounce back if he can just kind of put together, like Dave was saying. He's going to be playing some center field as well, I would imagine, with his speed and covering the ground and all that. And, with injured guys like Blackmon and Bryant and stuff, but no, he's interesting. I like him as price, at his draft price, is what it is.
Yeah, I like him too at his draft price. He was pretty good down the stretch too, at 272, 10 home runs in the second half. The exit velocity numbers were really good. Does need to raise that launch angle a little bit and does better work, obviously, at home than he does on the road, like most Rockies guys. Probably could be one of those guys that is traded at the deadline if the Rockies do decide to move on from him. But like Mark said, doesn't always happen, even with guys they're not anticipating re-signing, like John Gray. I think at that price, I think I will take a gamble. He's one of those guys that kind of burned me a little bit last year, but I'm willing to jump back in because, finish strong. You can platoon him with the Coors stuff, in your daily moves formats and NFBC. So I think it's a guy that I will be targeting kind of where he's going, especially with the kind of lack of depth in the outfield.
I'm kind of curious what was the reason for, basically his launch angle halved. Every other year he's been around 16%, give or take. And last year it was like literally half that. And so it definitely looks like last year was the fluke year. So I'm wondering, like, is it just like going to a new team? Does going to Coors have anything to do with that? I wonder if he's just so used to things breaking differently, when he got to Coors, because that's what I was wondering. Yeah. So I'm wondering if that'd be something I need to kind of take a deeper dive on, and maybe I will tonight because I'm going to be doing his projection at some point and see was it on breaking stuff where he really struggled, or was it on fastballs? Like, what was causing this? Do you really struggle more at home or away with the launch angle? So it's a very good question, and I will hope to answer it tonight when I'm doing his projection, probably around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. So he's another guy who was also much better at home than away last year. 13 homers, 307 average at home. So, elite production at home.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Anybody care about Nolan Jones? No. All right. There we go. Let's move on into the rotation and talk.
He's battling. He's battling he has one more option left. He's battling, It's the drama of spring training,
I was never high on him when he was a Guardians prospect, but I do think he has some power, but everything there's too much K's in his profile, and I don't imagine he gets enough playing time this year.
No, I think he's potentially a guy for next year, or maybe halfway through the season if they do trade guys. All right, let's move into the starting rotation, and I guess I'm just going to do it like this. Does anybody care about any member of the Coloradis rotation?
I'm always a sucker for Marquez. Maybe it's because of I don't know if hype's the right word, the local hype. You know what I mean? I feel like there's something, there's something there. He'd be better served if he wasn't in Coors, obviously.
Yes, but he is in Coors, Mark. That's the problem.
I know, and he's also in a contract. Well, he has a club option. They'll probably
doesn't matter.
They're gonna pick it up. Yeah, for sure they'll pick it up.
Yeah.
One of my biggest issues with Marquez is the fact that he's not even consistent year to year on where he's good. Because we've had a couple years where he's been like elite on the road and go, okay, well, I only get to use him on the road, but he's elite on the road. And then I, backfill with my bench when he's at home, right? And then he flipped it around and he was great at home and he was awful on the road. Like, I don't even know how to use him. I think the only place you can draft Marquez is in a best ball league where the computer gets to decide when to use him and when not to use him. And like, I don't play in a ton of best ball leagues anymore. So like, it just seems really unlikely I'm going to end up with Marquez on any teams.
Agree. Yeah. I mean, like we were talking about before, his stuff, he has good stuff, but it doesn't move like it's like enough like it should when he's pitching in Coors. So, and I mean, last year, obviously he was much worse at home, but we don't know from year to year where he's going to be better or worse. So he's too much of a headache for me to bother with.
Now, I will say, for those of you who are playing in dynasty leagues, if you are in a position where you are not being competitive this year, but you are rebuilding for the future, I love Rockies pitchers. Like, I will fill up my team with Rockies pitchers because it gets you the innings limits that you need to get in these dynasty leagues in order not to lose like draft stock and things like that. But will destroy your ratios in order to make sure you're at the bottom of the standing to get a higher draft pick. So in
I see. I'm like, wait, what?
I absolutely love Rockies.
It's like you get Rockies pitchers to tank to get the better.
Yes,
get the better picks.
Mm-hmm. I'm very pro Kyle Freeland and Austin Gomber. Then
Gomber, oh god, oh there were some Gomberings last year.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Even with Marquez, I mean, 180 innings the last 2 years. I don't know. 402 xFIP last year. I don't know. In draft champions, I've definitely taken some of him. I'll put it like that for sure. You know what I mean?
I'll take a Rockies pitcher in a draft champions just because, like, at some point you just need innings. Like, yeah I mean,
yeah. I mean that's the thing. I mean the innings. I mean it's just it's just you look at it. It's like 162, 196, 174, 180, 181, 2/3. Like,
but nobody's targeting them. We're just saying, like, yes, they're useful for innings because they're going to fall in drafts a lot. They're going to go later in their ADP. In DCs, I think that's fine. In regular drafts, non-DCs, I'm not touching them.
Yeah, agreed. Daniel Bard was kind of like the breakout closer last year, like out of nowhere, where people were pretty much ignoring him in drafts. He was going, towards the end of drafts, ended up being one of the most cost effective and kind of rock solid closers in the game last year. He's going a little bit higher, but he's not breaking your bank this year. Are you interested in Daniel Bard there, Mark?
Yes, depending on, it depends on how I draft the rest of my team. You know what I mean? If I miss on some closers, I'm happy to take him. The thing about it is if he's healthy, he's starting the season as the closer, right? It's going to get you hopefully 10 to 15 saves. If you were to be ineffective and lose his job, right? Hopefully at the beginning of the year, he'd get you some saves. And then you can do the waiver wire churn thing. You know what I mean? Then you can find the next, hopefully not a Merriweather, situation for a couple of years ago. But, you find kind of the next guy, right? You find the next guy. I'd rather take a guy that starts the season, even if it's shaky, rather start the season with a guy that has the job, lock in hopefully a handful of saves and go get the other saves. Then try to get the guy behind him or behind somebody else and hope that the guy ahead of him loses his job and it never happens on this guy on my bench that's just not accumulating any useful stats. But the thing is, it's his job. If he's healthy, he'll have it at least to start the season. Relievers, it's so hard to predict effectiveness, in my opinion. You know what I mean? It's hard to predict that, but they also don't give closer jobs off of that. It's also hard to, managers just give guys the jobs, I think there are some interesting bullpen names that could potentially do it if he gets hurt or is ineffective, but I'd be happy to take him. I think he's a little skills wise, it's uncertain, but I think his role is certain. And there's really only a handful of guys. I mean, most of the guys are really elite guys I miss on somebody early, I'll go take him around his ADP. I'm not going to target him. I'm not going to go out of my way to get him, but he's a nice guy if I miss to try to go get maybe a half round or round early or something if I really feel like I need to get a closer, especially in a lot of these drafts we're doing this time of year where it's draft champions or gladiators or some of these deals where we don't have the waiver wire to use, right? But even in a main event where everybody's going to get pushed up, he'll probably be on the tail end of that of some tier, and I'd be happy to grab him if I miss a premium guy.
What about you, Dave? Are you a Daniel Bard fan?
He's 38, and he's obviously going to expect some regression coming with the ratios. I mean, his home runs per 9 was down to 0.45 last year. Can't expect that to continue, especially in Coors. But the guy throws 98. He gets ground balls. He knows how to pitch in Coors, and he's got 54 saves the last 2 years, and there's no way that they're not going to remember that. I mean, the leash is going to be long there, and there's really nobody there that I'm really worried about taking the job. I mean, Dinelson Lamet is interesting, but I don't know that he can even pitch enough to be an everyday closer kind of guy, even if he is successful in Coors. But I love those guys who are entrenched as closers. I mean, could he lose it with his skills? Yeah, he could. The projection systems are not bullish on him at all. I do think that he's much better than the projection systems are projecting him for, but he is a risk. He's not a guy that I want to go into the draft saying, okay, I want this guy, but I don't think he's the worst option either.
Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you guys. Like, I think he's a pretty decent fallback option. As a guy, if you missed out on kind of the upper tiers, or as like a kind of medium and like seat or closer too. No problem with him. I do think he's going to have a lot of rope. I do wonder if the Rockies decide to try to trade him, because I think if he is really good again in the first half, he probably would get a pretty decent return back. But again, Rocky's going to Rocky. So who knows if they'd actually trade him or just hold on to him, because we were on traded him last year.
We were on that trade deadline roundtable, and you guys asked me if Barr was getting traded, and like people were like, "Yeah, it kind of makes sense. He's 37." Like, I'm like, "No, they're talking about extending him," and then they actually extended him. They actually extended him like a month later. You know what I mean?
You nailed it.
Trade him, and the one. I mean, I got a lot of other stuff wrong, but I nailed that one, because it's like you just got to go in the mindset of these teams. Like, I don't agree with how they do business, but you have to understand how they do their business.
Yeah,
right.
No, we all know and are frustrated by how they do their business.
Yeah, but I feel like the Rangers kind of the same way. They're thought they're getting this youth movement, and then all of a sudden they're dropping in these $100 million contracts. So, anyways, I know we're not here to talk about the Rangers, but no, I mean he's got the job. I mean, the only thing that takes the job away from him, I think, is him being hurt. He's gonna have. He's been good. The other thing that's been good about him is his strikeout rate has been really good. In like the last 3 years, really. I mean, since he's been in Colorado, it's been pretty solid. So he might hurt you with his ERA is hard to project with relievers. WHIP is hard to project with relievers. He'll get you some strikeouts. He has the role.
There you go.
There you go. Well,
Mark, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's even though it's a hard team to talk about, it's fun to talk about fantasy baseball and all that. So,
I think next week we were looking at the Oakland A's. So speaking of hard teams to talk about,
we'll be doing the Oakland A's next week with Scott Jensen. So that'll be depressing, even more depressing. This is one. Mark, remind everybody where you can reach on social media, so that way, if and when you do start doing work again, people know where to find you.
Yeah, it's at Mark_Kieffer, Kieffer on Twitter.
And Dave, where do you reach? What are you working on?
At Run D McD. And once again, Jake did not do the high stakes heat like he said he would. So we'll see what happens moving forward.
There you go. You can reach me on Twitter at Justin Mason FWFB. Email me or the show, friendsoffantasybenefits@gmail.com. I'm writing daily at Fangraphs. I am doing these 30 team previews in 30 days, coming down the wire. This is the last week of them, as I believe this This episode will be number 24 of the 30. So looking forward to wrapping that up next week or early next week. TGFBI signups are going through the end of the month. So get signed up for TGFBI. Or if you want to try to win your way in, enter a satellite league, you can do that at TGFBI.com. Keep those 5-star reviews coming. They really, really help us out. For Mark, Dave, and myself, thank you for listening. Have a fantastic baseball offseason.